I felt the glass chill against my fingertips before the words ever reached me. It's strange how the body knows before the mind does. How skin tightens, how breath pauses, how the eyes go glassy like you're looking through water. The chandelier above us scattered light like falling ice, and in that glittering rain, my sister's voice rose, bright and sharp. "Happy 30th," Olivia announced, lifting her flute high enough to catch every shard of light. "To our pathetic sister who still rents." 43 faces turned toward me in a single satisfied shift. A murmur swept the private dining room at Westbrook House, the expensive kind of room where even the wallpaper looks privately educated. I heard laughter like cutlery being dropped. Someone whistled. The glass was still at my lips, untouched. I remember noticing the bubbles collapse at the surface, one by one, like tiny exits closing. I set the champagne down. If I drank, I would have to swallow what the room was doing to me. I couldn't risk learning the taste of it. "Live," I said, soft enough to seem polite, steady enough to survive. "That's not—" "Oh, please," she sang, smiling at the table as if we were all contestants on a game show she was hosting. 30 years old, still in a studio, still, what is it you do again? Library thing?" "I'm a literary archivist," I said to my plate. "Right," Olivia nodded, already bored of the truth. "She plays with old books while the rest of us contribute to society." Somebody choked on a laugh. Aunt Diane clinked her spoon against her glass for attention. She always clinked for the wrong things. "To Rachel, may she find purpose." The room answered with a sea of raised glass stems and the kind of laughter that sounds like a door locking. I stared at the salmon cooling on my plate, perfectly pink, perfectly seasoned, perfectly beyond tasting, while the heat climbed my chest and bloomed across my face. My heartbeat was a drum under the table. Tyler, our cousin, couldn't meet my eyes. That part landed like a private bell. He knew. He didn't know everything, but he knew enough to understand the joke wasn't funny. Uncle Frank, 3 bourbons in and newly brave, leaned back like a king who'd won me in a bet. "Nothing wrong with renters," he declared. "Someone's got to be at the bottom for the rest of us to be at the top." The laughter grew teeth. I glanced down the gleaming table, silver under crystal under sky. Manhattan glittering beyond the windows like it had been hired to be our witness. Every detail felt exaggerated, like I'd fallen into a magazine spread of my own humiliation. Cloth napkins folded into flowers, a white cake high enough to need its own weather, place cards with our names in a font that sounded like wealth when you looked at it. What nobody in that room knew, not even the ones who suspected something was lucky about their lives, was this. I had been signing their miracles. For 5 years, I kept my name in the shadows like a stagehand pulling ropes no one noticed. Trust disbursements that always arrived on time. Debts that slid into administrative errors. Investments that materialized like benevolent fog. Their good fortune had my fingerprints all over it. I could have told them in that moment, could have emptied the room with a sentence. But I had learned that truth spoken at the wrong time becomes just another punchline. "Look at Tyler," Olivia went on, palms up like a preacher. "3rd investment property. Aunt Diane's boutique, thriving. Kyle's startup, finally taking off. We build, we move, we achieve." Tyler's throat tightened. He took a sip to buy himself a second, and even from across the table, I heard the glass tap his tooth. The sound made me forgive him a little. Guilt has a small sound when it's honest. Olivia swirled her champagne and smiled at me with the brightness she used when cameras were watching. Meanwhile, Rachel's stagnant. She savored the word. "Don't you ever think about what Mom and Dad would say? They gave us so much, and well," she shrugged in a way that cost money to learn. "Look at what I built." I remembered the night she almost lost it all. 2 years ago, winter crushing the city's spine, Olivia calling me with her voice dipped in pride and terror. Payroll due, investors ghosting, a lease about to snap shut over her head. She had said, if there were any angels left. And I had become one. Anonymously. On purpose. Because of a promise in a will and a promise in my chest. Our parents had been quiet people, the kind who loved without announcing it, the kind who built safety nets with their hands and hid them in plain sight. When they died, the reading of the will was small and uneventful, the kind of small that holds an entire ocean. They left everything to me, with a single instruction written in my mother's careful letters. Take care of them as you see fit. As you see fit. A trust disguised as freedom. A charge disguised as love. I had done it exactly, and I had done it too well. Let's toast, Olivia stood, tipsy on conquest. To Rachel, proof that not everyone needs to succeed. Some of us are examples.
42 glasses lifted. Mine stayed where it was, a small rebellion that no one noticed. I tasted metal. I realized I had bitten my cheek until blood shimmered under my tongue like a secret. I stood without scraping my chair. I learned a long time ago that the softer you move, the louder the room must listen. Thank you for the memories, I said. My voice belonged to someone steady. It surprised me enough to trust it. Memories? Olivia laughed. Honey, you're not going anywhere. You always show up for the holidays. She tilted her head, mock sweet. Where else would you go? 43 faces waited for the performance. The smile, the swallow, the forgiveness that keeps a family story tidy. I reached into my bag and clicked my phone awake. The screen gilded my palm in cold light. One message, 3 words. My lawyer and I had agreed to them weeks ago, then months ago. Then we'd set the plan on a high shelf and waited for the air to ripen. Execute Order 30. My thumb hovered for 1 heartbeat, 2. The chandelier hummed. The city glittered like broken promises. In the reflection of the window, I could see myself, small but upright, lit from above like a truth being called to the stand. I pressed send. What, landlord texting? Olivia grinned, all teeth. I've got a friend looking for a roommate. Might ease your budget. That's kind, I said, adjusting my napkin like a surrender flag I had no intention of waving. I'll be fine. You're not leaving, Aunt Diane called, already angling her phone to frame me like a wildlife sighting. We haven't cut the cake. It's got 30 sparklers. She said it the way some people say grandchildren. I'm tired, I said, which was the truest thing I'd said all night. Thank you all for coming. This has been illuminating. I didn't let myself look back when I walked away. Love makes you look back. Pride makes you look back. I was neither loved nor proud in that room. I was a mirror they had enjoyed sneering into. The door closed behind me with a soft, expensive click. The hallway outside smelled like lemon polish and old money. A waiter passed and glanced at me with professional kindness. I pressed my palms to the cool wall for a second, the way you brace yourself on a ship. I breathed. In the mirror opposite the lifts, I looked composed, which is the kind of lie that saves you. I stepped into the night and let Manhattan's cold wrap around me like a cloak I paid for with my own breath. Taxi lights strobed. A soft ache bloomed under my ribs, a familiar ache, the kind you carry when you've been both invisible and indispensable for so long, the roles blur. People like to tell you that the first cut is the deepest. They're wrong. The deepest is the cut you make yourself, on purpose, clean and precise, to save the rest of you. I had just made it. Back at home, my pathetic studio, as they like to imagine it, I turned the key and let the door swing open into the quiet that knows your real name. From the street, my floor was a modest rectangle of yellow light. Inside, it opened into a sweep of glass and air, the city thrown at my feet like a glittering apology. First editions breathed behind museum glass. A Virginia Woolf dedication, neat and blue. A Hemingway signature, slanted and impatient. A private continent of paper, rescued and tended, the way my mother taught me to touch things that mattered. I kicked off my shoes and poured coffee instead of wine. The screen of my phone lit the marble counter. One read receipt, then two, then the dots, their lives typing. I stood at the window and watched a couple cross the street holding hands like a shared secret. For a long minute, I tried to mourn what I'd wanted from my family, a seat at the table where I didn't have to earn my bowl. I couldn't quite find the tears for it. Maybe grief had been leaking out of me all night, one heartbeat at a time, and now there was only room left for the future. The phone finally rang. The name pulsed like a siren. Olivia, 8:47 a.m. I let it go. 8:48, I let it go. 8:52, I let it go. 8:56, I answered. "What did you do?" she screamed, voice cracking on the last word like it didn't fit her mouth. I took a sip of coffee. Central Park looked like a stitched quilt beneath a bright, cold sky. "Good morning," I said. "What seems to be the problem?" Her breath hit the speaker like a storm. "Don't play dumb. The lawyer, the trust, it's gone." I watched a jogger disappear behind a row of bare trees and listened to my sister meet the ground. "Which trust, Liv?" I asked gently, the way a doctor asks where it hurts. She swallowed. "Grandma's! The 50,000? It just stopped." I set the mug down and let the quiet expand, the way archivists let fragile pages breathe before turning them. Wind rattled the glass. Somewhere below, a siren moaned and then forgot what it wanted. How strange. Grandma's estate was settled years ago. She only left a few thousand. You said so. Loudly. Silence on the line. The kind with a shape. The kind where someone begins to see what they've been looking at all along. Outside, a gull wheeled overhead and flashed white against the sky. Inside, my reflection stood framed in the window, a woman holding a phone like a gavel. I let the pause ripen. "Liv," I said softly, "are you ready to talk?" The silence on the line was so loud it almost hummed. I could picture Olivia in her penthouse. No, my penthouse, pacing in that silk robe she always bragged about buying in Milan. Her voice finally cracked through the air like thin glass. It stopped. The payments. All of them. The trust fund, Kyle's stipend, even Uncle Frank's transfers. The lawyer said something about benefactor redirection. What does that even mean? Benefactor, I repeated almost kindly. That's an interesting word, isn't it? Someone who gives quietly. Someone who expects nothing in return. "Rachel," she hissed, and I could hear the panic now bubbling under her voice. "If this is your idea of a joke, I don't joke about money. That's always been your department." The line went quiet again. I watched my own reflection in the glass window, calm, still, detached. A stranger who had finally learned how to breathe without permission. "You're lying," she said finally. "There's no way." "Then explain it," I said softly. 5 years of anonymous funding, Liv. Millions flowing from nowhere. You never once asked who it came from? Her breathing hetched. It was family money. It had to be. Grandma or Dad's old accounts or... Grandma left $3,200 and a porcelain tat collection. Dad's estate was settled into a private trust, one that didn't belong to you. Silence. Then a whisper. "It was you." The words hung between us like smoke. I said nothing. I wanted her to feel it, the shape, the taste, the weight of what that meant. Why? She finally choked out. Why would you do that? Give us money and not tell anyone. I took a breath because I wanted to know if love could exist without a price tag. You can't be serious. Oh, I'm very serious, I said, my voice quiet, dangerous even to myself. I wanted to see if my family would love me for me or for what I could give them. Turns out, I got my answer. She exhaled hard, like she'd been punched. Rachel, please, we can fix this. You don't have to. I cut her off. Your next payment was due on the 5th. The one for your studio lease? $3 million. You've been paying interest only for years. How do you know about that? I know about everything, Olivia. Uncle Frank's mortgage, Kyle's investor loans, Aunt Diane's boutique overdrafts. You all live in castles made of my patience. Her voice fell apart into sobs. Please, you can't just cut us off. We'll lose everything. Everything you never earned. Let's call things by their right names for once. The phone began buzzing. Uncle Frank, Aunt Diane, Tyler, the calls stacking like dominoes. Word was spreading. Rachel, I didn't mean I did. Every word at that table last night, every smirk, every toast. I swallowed the lump rising in my throat. You celebrated my failure using my money. Her sobs softened into pleading. We were stupid, cruel. I know that now, but you can't do this. You're family. Then act like it. Please, just tell me what you want, begged she. Money, an apology, just name it. I almost laughed, not cruelly, just brokenly. You still don't get it. I don't want anything. I never did. Then why? Because I needed to stop pretending. I needed to see what happened when the curtain fell, when the invisible sister stopped funding the show. There was a knock at my door. Soft, but insistent. I glanced at the monitor. Olivia. And behind her, Uncle Frank, Kyle, 2 cousins, the whole family in crisis uniform, expensive coats, eyes full of entitlement, panic dressed as apology. Olivia? I said into the phone. You might want to turn around. She froze. I could hear her footsteps echoing in the hallway through the speaker. The next sound was her whispering my name outside the door. I opened it. They all stopped dead. The studio apartment they had mocked for years opened into a world they never imagined. Marble floors, glowing under soft light, and books preserved like relics, and walls of glass spilling Manhattan across the horizon. The air smelled faintly of espresso and cedar. Uncle Frank actually stumbled backwards. Jesus, Mary, Rachel, what is this place? My home, I said simply. Though you might recognize parts of it. The same architect designed your vacation house, Uncle Frank. I paid him then, too. Olivia's eyes darted across the room, the antique manuscripts, the framed letters, the polished piano their mother once loved. Her face paled as understanding set in. Dad was smarter than any of you knew. And Mom's manuscripts? Turns out rare literature ages better than stock portfolios. You could have told us, Olivia whispered. I tried, I said quietly. Remember that Christmas when I mentioned I'd done well in investing? You laughed and told me to invest in scratch-off tickets. Remember Thanksgiving, Uncle Frank, when I offered to help with your mortgage? You said you didn't take handouts from people who couldn't afford a car. None of them spoke. The weight of the past 5 years pressed into the silence like humidity. Kyle was the first to break. So what now? You just watch us fall apart? I'm not doing anything. I'm just stepping back. You all wanted independence, success, pride. Well, now you have it. No more invisible hands to catch you. Olivia looked around again as if the walls might tell her something she could live with. You're punishing us. No, I'm teaching you what I had to learn alone. She stared at me through tears. What are we supposed to do? Start over. Work. Earn. Learn the value of something you didn't inherit. They stayed for almost an hour, arguing, pleading, bargaining, but the decision had already been made the night before, sealed with a text and a lifetime of silence. When they finally left, I closed the door gently, the way you close a book you've already read too many times. For the first time in years, the apartment was quiet. Not the kind of quiet that hurts, but the kind that breathes. I stood in front of my mother's manuscripts, tracing the spine of a worn volume, and whispered to no one, "Lesson delivered." The city blinked below me. Lights turning on, lights turning off. A million lives beginning again. And somewhere in that chaos, so did mine. The days that followed were louder than any silence I'd ever known. It started with calls. Dozens. Hundreds. Missed, ignored, deleted. My voicemail filled faster than I could clear it. Voices that had once laughed at my rent were now breaking over static, pleading for explanations, mercy, miracles. Then came the messages. "Please, Rachel, we didn't mean it. There's got to be a way to fix this. You can't do this to family." Family? The word rolled around in my head until it lost all meaning. By the end of that week, every anonymous fund I'd created was frozen. Every false front dismantled. Every account redirected. It was like cutting puppet strings and watching the marionettes collapse. At first, I thought I'd feel relief, that clean, weightless kind that comes after finally telling the truth. But it wasn't relief. It was grief. Cold and heavy, the kind that sits behind your ribs and watches you breathe. By Monday morning, the first domino had fallen. Olivia's chain of boutique fitness studios filed for bankruptcy. The same empire she'd bragged about building from grit and genius couldn't survive 3 days without its unseen angel. She called again, 22 times. I didn't answer. Uncle Frank's mortgage defaulted next. His country estate was repossessed by the very bank whose debts I'd erased years ago. The man who once told me someone has to be at the bottom was now calling from a rented basement suite with no windows. Aunt Diane closed her boutique. The thriving business that had never once turned a profit finally met reality. Her last post on social media was a quote about simplicity being peace. I almost smiled. Kyle's tech company vanished overnight. His investors, realizing the invisible funding had vanished, pulled out like a rat's, leaving a sinking ship. He went from CEO to unemployed in the time it takes to refresh an inbox. They were all unraveling, thread by thread. And me? I watched. Not gleefully, just quietly, with the detached awe of someone who's finally seeing gravity do what it always promised. But the strangest thing happened after the first wave of chaos. The calls changed. The tone shifted. Where there was once outrage, there was now apology. Where there was denial, there was desperation. "Rachel," Olivia's voice cracked one morning, "you made your point. We were cruel. I was cruel. But you can't just watch us drown." "I'm not watching. I'm remembering. Please, I can't pay rent. My business is gone. I've lost everything." "Then maybe now," I said softly, "you'll understand what it feels like to start from zero." "Why are you doing this?" "Because I did it for 5 years, and you called it failure." Her sobs filled the phone. It didn't make me happy, but it didn't hurt either. It just was. A month passed, then 2. Their lives began collapsing publicly. Credit reports, social posts, whispers at family gatherings. For years, they'd bragged about their achievements. Now they were explaining their losses. I became a ghost in their stories. The one who went too far. The one who changed. They still didn't understand that I hadn't changed at all. I just stopped pretending. But beneath all that ruin, something unexpected started to grow. Kyle sent me a text late one night. I got a job. Not as a founder, just an employee. Feels weird, but kind of right. Then Aunt Diane mailed me a handwritten letter. Shaky cursive, cheap paper. She'd found a job at a public library. It's quiet here. You'd like it. I finally understand why you love books. Each message was a small crack in the armor of who they used to be. Through those cracks, I could see people, not caricatures of wealth and pride, but tired, softer humans trying to learn. And then, one afternoon, my doorbell rang again. Olivia. But this time, she didn't arrive in pearls and heels. Her hair was tied back, her coat looked borrowed. Her eyes, the same eyes that had once gleamed with superiority, now shimmered with something closer to truth. "Rachel," she whispered when I opened the door. "Can I come in?" I nodded. She stepped inside, looked around the same space that had once stunned her, and didn't ask a single question about it. Instead, she stood in the center of the room, twisting her fingers. "I've been working 2 jobs, a front desk shift and teaching yoga classes at night. It's not much, but it's mine." I said nothing. "I just wanted to tell you that I'm sorry. Not for losing the money, not for the studio. For losing you." Something inside me shifted. Not forgiveness yet, just the space where forgiveness might grow. "I remember how you used to talk about your work, about the notes you'd find in the margins of old books, the stories between stories. You said it made you feel connected. I didn't understand that before. But now, I think I do." Her voice cracked on the last word. For the first time in years, I saw my sister, not the socialite, not the CEO, not the villain of my story, but the girl who used to braid my hair before school and sneak cookies into my backpack. "I don't expect you to forgive me," she said, stepping back toward the door. "I just wanted you to know that I see you now." She left before I could answer. That night, I sat by the window again, the city glowing beneath me like a map of 1,000 second chances. The anger that had once filled me like fire was cooling into something steadier, something like peace. For years, I'd lived invisible, both as their benefactor and their scapegoat. But now, for the first time, I wasn't either. I was just me. Rachel, archivist, daughter, sister, human. And maybe that was enough. A full year passed before anyone mentioned Westbrook House again. By then, the scandal had cooled. The gossip had turned into family folklore, rewritten to make everyone sound a little less cruel, a little more victimized by circumstance. But stories have a way of preserving the truth underneath their lies, like handwriting impressions on old paper. And when you've spent your life archiving other people's stories, you learn to read what's underneath. I didn't rebuild the trust fund. I didn't restart the payments. I didn't need to. They had started to rebuild themselves. Tyler left Manhattan altogether, moved to Oregon, sent me an email saying he was learning what quiet sounds like. He attached a picture of a small wooden cabin under a gray sky. "No investors here," he wrote, "just weather." Uncle Frank took a job as the financial consultant at a local community center. He started teaching teenagers about budgeting. The same man who once said, "Someone has to be at the bottom." He still sends me Christmas cards with short notes, in all caps, as if shouting can make amends. Aunt Diane's boutique is gone, but she writes to me every few months. Her letters smell like old perfume and humility. She still signs them, "Love, your favorite aunt." And Olivia. She didn't vanish like I expected. She stayed. She fought. She rebuilt her life piece by piece, teaching morning classes, managing a small yoga studio she rented on her own dime. No angel investors, no invisible safety nets. She started showing up differently, softer, quieter, stripped of performance. When she asked to meet again, it wasn't for money. It was a rainy afternoon in early spring. The coffee shop was half empty, the kind of place where people come to read more than talk. She was already there when I walked in, hair damp, hands curled around a chipped ceramic mug. "Your treat," she said immediately, as if to clarify the rules. We sat for a while in silence, the kind of silence that once would have terrified her. "I've been thinking about that night," she said finally, eyes fixed on the table. "The birthday dinner." I said nothing. "I used to tell myself it was just a joke, that we were teasing you, like families do, but it wasn't, was it? We were performing cruelty because it made us feel powerful." Her eyes lifted to mine. They were red, but steady. "You didn't deserve that." I let the words sit. They didn't need to be answered. I kept wondering why you didn't just flaunt it. Why you didn't throw your wealth in our faces the way we would have. I smiled faintly. Because power isn't meant to humiliate. It's meant to reveal. She nodded slowly. "You revealed us." I sipped my coffee. "I revealed the truth. The rest you did yourselves." "I know, and I've been trying to live differently since." I studied her face, the faint lines in her eyes, the quiet exhaustion of someone who's finally learned how to work. "You look happier," I said. "I am," she admitted. "Turns out success feels different when it's earned." She paused, then added softly, "And I think I finally understand you. Why you love what you do." "Archiving?" "No," she said, smiling faintly. "Preserving stories. Seeing people through what they leave behind." Her words hit me in a place I didn't know was still tender. That night, after I got home, I walked to the shelf that held my mother's manuscripts. The air in the room was cool and still, humming faintly with the dehumidifiers. I traced a finger across the spine of a worn book, to the Lighthouse, first edition, her favorite. In the back of it was a note in her handwriting. "Love them, Rachel, but never let them define your worth." I hadn't read that line in years, and yet somehow it had shaped every choice I'd made since the day she died. Maybe I had loved them, in my own broken way. Loved them enough to make them face themselves. Loved them enough to stop paying for their illusions. Loved them enough to let them fall. Because sometimes love isn't rescue. Sometimes it's the refusal to keep pretending someone can't stand on their own. It's strange, the things that survive ruin. A year later, on my 31st birthday, Olivia sent a single text. "No toasts, just dinner, my treat." I stared at it for a long time before replying. "Sure, I'll bring the cheap champagne." We met at a small restaurant uptown. No chandeliers, no skyline view, no audience. Just two sisters sitting across from each other, trading small stories, cautious smiles, and the kind of laughter that doesn't sting. For the first time in years, it felt real. I still live in the same penthouse. I still work surrounded by manuscripts that smell like dust and eternity. But something inside me has shifted.
I used to believe my family's cruelty had written me into their story as the forgotten chapter, the one everyone skips. But now I see it differently. I wasn't the chapter they skipped. I was the one they hadn't learned how to read yet. And now, finally, they're learning. So yes, Olivia was right in a way. I do still rent. Not an apartment, not a studio, but space. Space in people's lives. The difference is now they earn it with kindness, with humility, with something real. And for the first time in my life, that's enough. The champagne glass froze halfway to my lips that night a year ago, and I thought that was the moment everything ended. But I was wrong. That was the moment everything began.